My name is Emma Johansson, and I'm 32 years old. The age people say you should finally know yourself. I knew myself a long time ago. I was the background character in my own family, the one you barely notice in old sitcoms, smiling at the fridge, handing someone a dish, stepping out of the punchline's way. I learned that role early because my older sister, Brianna Johansson, was the main event. Brianna had that undefeated, sun through clouds charisma that made adults forgive scorch marks. Literally once, she tried to smoke and fuse a middle school science project on our back deck and singed a third of the railing. Mom called it brave curiosity. I got grounded for saying it was reckless. That's the Johansson household in one scene. Brianna the meteor, me the weather report. By 15, I was bagging groceries at Dixon's at 6 a.m., memorizing produce codes and swallowing customers' sighs. Brianna was breaking curfew with a wink that turned consequences into compliments. I took the early shift before school. She took the spotlight and came home to reheated applause. Work became my language. In high school, I cracked open hand-me-down laptops, soldered crooked caps, resold them for grocery money. In my early 20s, I taught myself design at 2 a.m., fingers numb from a space heater that lied about being efficient. By 26, a restaurant chain took a chance on me. A real rebrand, my first multi-site contract. 2 years later, I bought a small brick house in Springfield, Missouri. 3 bedrooms, a stubborn porch that complained with every step, and a furnace older than my boundaries. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I called Mom to tell her. "That's nice, Em," she said. She only used the nickname when she felt busy. "But are you sure you don't want to wait for something less boring?" If Brianna had signed a lease on a broom closet with string lights, they would have thrown a parade and called it bohemian. I paid for everything the house swallowed. Roof patches, the new washer my parents needed one January when theirs died mid-spin, the whisper expensive furnace repair. No one sees, but everyone breathes. I didn't do it because they asked. I did it because I thought that's what good daughters do. Be the net no one mentions until they fall. Still, every holiday I became the family's beige wall. Dad would lean back in his recliner and ask, "So, still hiding behind all that work?" Like solvency was a personality defect. Mom would squeeze my hand and say, "Honey, you have too much money and not enough memories." As if the only memories that counted were the loud ones that cost other people. Meanwhile, Brianna broke things. Jobs, leases, unpaid balances, and got praised for taking risks. I could pay my bills without them, and somehow that made me the boring one. I won't pretend I didn't care. I told myself their opinions rolled off me like rain off a sealed deck. But small weather can rot wood. When I gave them big gifts, an ergonomic recliner, a convection microwave, I told myself it didn't matter that Brianna showed up late with a gas station Merlot and still got the standing ovation. I told myself I was above it. But if you pressed a thumb on me, the bruise showed. There is one person in my life who never clapped for the wrong things. Daniel Reyes. Not loud, not saintly, just present. He asks questions and pays attention to the answers. He's the kind of man who will replace your windshield wipers without announcing it. And when you notice, he only says, "Rainy week." He never tried to rescue me from my family. He just respected my no, the one I rarely used. His ex-girlfriend, Tessa Quinn, resurfaces sometimes in our small city the way old songs do, cropping up in grocery aisles and gossip. We're polite, unremarkable. It barely matters, except that Tessa manages a very particular restaurant now. The kind with marble-topped bar tables and a menu that says bistro, like it invented both beasts and bistros. File that under foreshadowing I didn't recognize when I should have. The week before my mother's 60th birthday, I got a friendly voicemail at 3:17 p.m. while mocking up a typography sheet. A woman's voice, practiced and pleasantly bright. "Hi, Ms. Johansson. This is Tessa from Brevity Bistro. Just confirming your card is on file for your party's deposit next Friday. Let us know if you'd like the balance charged to the same card after dinner." My cursor blinked on Helvetica as something sank, a sudden elevator drop in my stomach. I hadn't booked anything. Dad had promised he was handling everything, with the weary pride of a man who thought Yelp reviews were ransom notes. I replayed the message. "Your card is on file." My card? On file. I should have called Dad and asked why my card had somehow volunteered for a party I didn't plan. I should have called Tessa back and said, "Remove my number, remove my card, remove my presumed consent." Instead, I set the phone down and listened to the house hum, the fridge cycling, the furnace trying not to be dramatic. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I was so good at triage, I called it peace. On the night of Mom's birthday, I arrived 10 minutes early. The private room was trimmed with eucalyptus and tiny tea lights that smelled like clean hotel sheets. A long table, white pyramids of napkin origami. I placed my gift bag at the far end like a quiet claim and let the room fill. Relatives I hadn't seen since Brianna's last engagement party, the one that ended because a DJ deposit misunderstanding met a champagne cork. Neighbors who called me Emma, the reliable one, as if reliability were a hobby like pottery. And then Brianna herself, shoulders squared, grin broad enough to sell flood insurance, late enough to be noticed. She made rounds the way weather moves across a plain, touching everything, asking nothing. When she passed me, she tapped the chair beside mine with 2 fingers. "Hey, Em," she said, affectionate, like a pat for a good dog. She didn't sit. Dinner tasted like it had been ironed. Compliments sounded like they'd been rehearsed in the car. I fielded the usual questions about whether I'd thought about taking a break from all that work, like my career was a nicotine habit. Then the toast began. Brianna stood, glass held just high enough to make the moment a performance. "To Mom," she beamed, "who put up with us with grace." Polite laughter. "And to Dad, hardest worker in the room, even when some of us—" Her eyes slipped toward me, playful. Took longer to figure it out. More laughter. My stomach tightened, a rubber band finding its last stretch. She turned fully, her smile sharpening into something clean and mean. "And to Emma," she said, "our quiet success story, proof that if you pour enough dollars into a hole, eventually it looks like a foundation." Laughter erupted, the relieved kind people love because it lets them be cruel together. Mom covered her mouth, shoulders trembling. Dad shook his head like he'd just seen sophisticated wit. The room blurred and snapped into focus all at once. I was suddenly aware of the stem of my glass under my fingers, the ridge where the base meets the bowl, the tiny ring it left on the linen. A part of me wanted to stand up and list the evidence, the roof patch, the emergency car payment I made for Brianna. Just until she got back on her feet, the months of utilities silently set to auto-pay, so my parents could sleep through bills. I wanted to name the generosity they turned into an insult. Instead, I did something simpler. I breathed. I tasted how thin the air was in that room, and I understood, finally, cleanly, that they were never going to change. Not for me, not for anyone. The joke would always be me. The tab would always be mine. When the dessert plates cleared, a server glided to my end of the table with institutional courtesy. "Ms. Johansson, would you like us to put this on the card we have on file?" Dad looked up, performatively surprised. "Oh, Emma, you didn't have to." There was no apology softening his voice, just that lazy satisfaction that had always found me. My hand didn't shake when I signed. It didn't shake when I slid my chair back, lifted the gift bag, and walked out. Behind me, laughter rose again, a different joke maybe, or the same one recycling itself. If they noticed I was gone, no one followed. At home, I didn't cry. I washed my hands for longer than necessary, as if I could rinse the invisible grease that clung to me. I turned on the lamp with the broken pull chain that still worked if you tugged it twice. Then I did the smallest, biggest thing I've ever done. I opened my banking app. The list looked like a confession written in calendar squares. Mortgage assistance, home insurance, utilities, Brianna, car note, internet, subscriptions. All tidy. All mine. I started canceling. One by one, little taps like cutting stitches, electricity, internet, insurance, the car note, the temporary mortgage help. When I hesitated, I remembered the laughter. I remembered Brianna's glass catching candlelight like a trophy. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet and typed a single word in cell A1, ledger. Line by line, I reconstructed my history of quiet funding. Dates, amounts, notes, no commentary, no campaign for sympathy, just facts with their makeup off. 6 pages later, I attached it to an email addressed to Mom, Dad, and Brianna. Subject: since you forgot. I hovered. Then I clicked send. No flourish. Just a door closing without a slam. I slept harder than I had in years. In the morning, my phone woke up angry. Voicemails from Mom. You misunderstood everything. Brianna was joking. A text from Dad. You're overreacting. Be reasonable. A barrage from Brianna. Wow. Spreadsheet? Pathetic. I made coffee and didn't reply. The steam lifted like breath from a winter street. At 10 a.m., a knock. Through the peephole, Mom, holding a white box tied with a red string. Pastries, a treaty made of sugar and denial. I didn't open the door all the way, and for once in my life, I wasn't hungry. Through the narrow crack of the door, I could see my mother's eyes. Bright, hopeful, trembling just enough to look sincere. Hi, sweetheart, she said, voice wrapped in apology-shaped velvet. I thought we could talk. I brought your favorite strawberry danishes. You loved these as a little girl. I didn't move. The smell of butter and sugar drifted through the doorway, too sweet for the hour. Mom, I said quietly, you don't need to do that. She smiled the way people do when they're trying to rewind time. You know your sister didn't mean that toast. She was nervous. She always makes jokes when she's uncomfortable. You know how she is. Yes, I said, I do. Her grip on the pastry box tightened. We didn't realize they put it on your card, honey. Your father just assumed, well, you've always been the one who handles things. I almost laughed. That line, you've always been the one who handles things, had been her lullaby since I was 12. When Brianna lost her debit card, I handled it. When Mom forgot to pay a utility bill, I handled it. When Dad's car broke down on the interstate, guess who handled it? I leaned my shoulder against the doorframe. Mom, do you hear yourself? You're saying the same thing again. You're calling me strong, so you don't have to take responsibility. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I continued, steady, almost detached. You keep using "you're stronger than her" as an excuse. But it's not a compliment. It's just your permission slip to keep taking. Her eyes welled up instantly. She always cried fast. It was her first line of defense. We didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. Everything we do is for both of you. I shook my head. No, everything you do is to protect Brianna from consequences, and you use me as your insurance policy. For a moment, we just stood there, silence and sugar between us. Then I said softly, take the pastries with you, Mom. They don't fix anything. She blinked, startled. For once, she didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, turned, and walked down the steps, box clutched like a peace offering to no one. When I closed the door, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt weightless, like something had finally unclenched in my chest after years of pretending not to notice it was there. That night, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at my kitchen table. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the wind scraping tree branches against the siding. My laptop blinked with a new email notification from Dad. Subject, for your records. Attachment, statements, PDF. The body of the email was short, clinical. Emma, I'm sending this because you deserve to know. We took out a line of credit against the house 2 years ago to help Brianna's startup. We didn't want to burden you. The bank is threatening foreclosure. Your mother doesn't know the full amount yet. Dad. I stared at the screen. For a long moment, all I could hear was the faint hiss of my own breath. Then I clicked the attachment. There it was. Pages of transactions, monthly withdrawals, loan balances, consulting fees, thousands of dollars, month after month, bleeding from the house that was supposed to be theirs. It wasn't just financial recklessness, it was betrayal disguised as love. Brianna's marketing company hadn't just failed, it had taken our parents' safety net down with it. And still, they had toasted her as brave. I scrolled to the last page, my fingers cold against the trackpad. There was a note scribbled at the bottom of one scanned document in Dad's handwriting. Don't tell Emma until it's under control. My stomach turned. Under control. That was always their phrase, wasn't it? Every family disaster lived under that lie until I was summoned to handle it. I shut the laptop, my reflection ghosting in the dark screen. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Just an eerie calm. The kind that comes when you realize you're not trapped in a nightmare anymore. You're waking up from it. The next morning, I called Miriam Green, my attorney. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and no nonsense. Emma, what's wrong? I took a breath. I need advice. My parents took out a credit line against their house to bail out my sister. They're drowning. The bank's close to foreclosure. Miriam didn't sound surprised, and I'm guessing they expect you to fix it. Probably, I said, but this time I want to fix it on my terms. What are you thinking? I want to buy the house, I said slowly, pay off the debt, then put it in a trust they can live in, but they can't borrow against it again. There was a pause. That's a strong boundary, Miriam said. You're protecting them and yourself. Are you sure you're ready for the fallout? I looked around my kitchen, the quiet order I'd built, the things that were truly mine. I've been ready for years, I said. I just didn't realize it. All right, she replied. I'll start the paperwork. That afternoon, I drafted an email to my parents. Simple, clear, no emotion. I'll be purchasing the house to resolve the debt. The property will be placed in a trust for you both to live in safely. This decision is final. I wish you peace. I hit send. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A new message from Dad. Thank you. 2 words. No apology, no explanation, just a ceasefire. Another notification appeared right after, from Brianna. You're kidding me, right? You're buying their house? You're cutting me out of everything? I didn't answer. I didn't owe her that. But in the silence that followed, a new awareness crept in. Something darker, sharper. A familiar name flashed in my mind. Tessa Quinn. The manager from Brevity Bistro. The ex-girlfriend who loved whispers. The woman who'd smiled too kindly when I arrived at the birthday dinner. If anyone knew my family's dirty details after that night, it would be her. And Brianna, who never could stand being out of the spotlight, had every reason to give her the next scandal to spread. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't over. The Johansons never let peace last long. I should have known Brianna wouldn't stay quiet for long. 2 days after I sent that email about the trust, she called. 3 times, then 4. When I finally answered, her tone came wrapped in false sweetness, the kind that foreshadowed venom. Wow, Em, look at you. Miss Savior Complex 2025, buying the family house like you're some kind of landlord. Tell me, does it feel powerful, holding everyone's lives in your hands? I leaned against the counter, gripping my coffee mug. It feels necessary. She laughed, sharp and humorless. You always think you're the only adult in the room. I don't think it, I said evenly. I just keep ending up proving it. Silence. Then the sound of her exhale, mocking, tired. You know, Tessa told me she felt bad for you at Mom's party. Said you looked lonely. Isn't that ironic? The one with all the money, still sitting alone. There it was, the name I'd been waiting for. Tessa Quinn, the ex-girlfriend of my boyfriend, the restaurant manager, the convenient audience for gossip. I didn't take the bait. You can tell Tessa I prefer loneliness over parasites, I said, then ended the call. I placed the mug down carefully before I dropped it. My hands were trembling. Not from fear, but from restraint. I'd spent years turning anger into endurance, learning how to carry insult quietly like it weighed nothing. But lately, the weight refused to disappear. That afternoon, Miriam called back with updates. Her voice was crisp, the way it always got when she'd already done half the impossible. The paperwork is ready. Once you transfer the payment, the title will be under the Johansson Family Trust, your parents as lifetime occupants, no borrowing power, no lines of credit. You'll own it, but they can live there safely. Good, I said. That's all I want. And Brianna? Miriam asked cautiously. She's not part of it, I replied. Not anymore. You're sure about that? Yes. My tone was quiet, but it didn't shake. Every time I rescued her, she called it love. Every time I stopped, she called it betrayal. I'm done letting her define the difference. Miriam hesitated, then sighed softly. You sound like someone who's finally protecting herself. I am, I said. And it feels strange, like I'm learning a new language. That night, I walked through my house, checking each light switch and window latch, like I always did when something big was coming. The quiet felt different now, less lonely, more earned. I'd started clearing the clutter that had no place anymore, old receipts from bailouts, folders labeled temporary help that had lasted years. I stacked them in a box and sealed it shut with tape. Before bed, I opened my laptop one last time. The ledger still sat in my sent folder, a time-stamped monument to everything they'd taken. I stared at the subject line, "Since you forgot." No part of me regretted sending it. When I closed the laptop, I realized there was nothing left for them to take. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Mom this time. Your father and I saw the trust paperwork. We appreciate what you're doing. We just wish it didn't have to be so formal. Formal. That word landed heavier than she intended. It wasn't formal. It was protection. Boundaries always sound cold to the people who benefited from your lack of them. I typed back. Formality is what keeps things fair. Then I turned off my phone. Later that afternoon, Daniel stopped by after work. He held out a takeout bag from a Thai place we both loved and raised an eyebrow. You look like someone who needs chili noodles and no questions. He didn't press, didn't pry. That was one of the things I loved most about him. He let silence be kind, not heavy. We ate on the couch, TV off, the world small and quiet for once. After dinner, I told him everything. The dinner humiliation, the canceled auto pays, the trust, Brianna's call. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. You finally stopped trying to earn respect from people who never learned how to give it, he said. That's not cold, Emma. That's brave. I felt something sting behind my eyes. Then why does it still hurt? Because you're grieving the version of them you needed, he said softly, not the ones you actually have. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, because he was right. The next morning, I signed the final documents. The house was officially mine, the debt erased, the line of credit closed, the trust established, sealed, and filed. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like exhaustion wrapped in relief. At noon, Miriam texted a short message. Done. You've protected them, and yourself. I stared at the words for a long moment. Protected them, protected myself. For once, those weren't opposites. By evening, I thought maybe the storm had passed. No calls, no drama, just the faint tick of the kitchen clock and the soft hum of the heater. Until another text came through, from Brianna. Wow, the house is in your name. Congrats, little sis. You've officially become the landlord of your own parents. That's some next-level control freak energy. I almost deleted it, but curiosity made me scroll. You think you're the hero? Tessa said she saw you smirking at dinner, like you loved watching us laugh at you. Maybe you planned the whole thing. Maybe you liked being the victim. My thumb hovered over block, but instead of replying, I typed one sentence. Get help, Brianna. Then I hit send and muted the conversation for good. Later that night, I went for a walk around my neighborhood. The air was cold enough to sting, but I welcomed it. Each breath felt like clarity. Crisp, sharp, alive. I passed by houses lit with soft lamplight and laughter seeping through curtains. For years, I'd thought family meant endurance, that the mark of a good daughter was how much pain she could swallow without spitting it back up. But standing under that brittle sky, I finally understood something else. Family isn't who needs you the most. It's who sees you the clearest. I looked up, saw my breath swirl away like smoke, and whispered it aloud just to hear it out in the world. I'm done bleeding to keep them comfortable. And for the first time, it didn't sound like defiance. It sounded like freedom. By the end of the week, I almost believed the quiet would last. I should have known better. Saturday morning came with a hard knock on the door. 3 short, angry hits. Through the peephole, Brianna. Hoodie, sunglasses, fury. I opened the door halfway, blocking her path. Morning, I said flatly. She scoffed. Oh, don't pretend you're calm. You think you can buy a house out from under your family and hide behind your spreadsheets? I didn't buy it out from under anyone, I replied. I bought it back from a bank that was about to take it. Brianna ripped off her sunglasses. You did it to humiliate us. No, I said evenly. You did that yourselves, at Mom's birthday. I just stopped funding the encore. Her jaw twitched. You always think you're better. I never said that, I replied quietly. But I did stop pretending we're the same. She stepped forward. You love control. You love being the savior. I loved peace, I said. You mistook it for silence. For a second, her bravado cracked. She looked like the sister I used to defend in high school hallways, the girl who cried when teachers yelled, but still managed to charm her way out of detention. Then she hardened again. You think Mom and Dad will forgive you for this? You made them sign legal papers. They're embarrassed. They're safe, I said simply. That's what matters. Brianna's lip curled. You're pathetic, Emma. You bought yourself a pedestal. I opened the door a little wider and pointed toward the street. Go home, Brianna. Her eyes darted around my entryway. The calm, the clean walls, the framed print of the sign Daniel had given me last Christmas. Your worth isn't measured in what you give away. She smirked. Cute decor. Must be nice playing victim with good lighting. I didn't rise to it. I just met her stare until she looked away. When she finally turned, the words she muttered floated back over her shoulder. You'll regret this. The door clicked shut behind her like punctuation. That night, Daniel came over with a bottle of red and 2 paper cups because my glasses were still in the dishwasher. He sat on the couch beside me, quiet, waiting. She came by, I said finally. I figured. She thinks I did this for control. He shrugged. Of course she does. People who live off your energy always call boundaries control. They have to believe that, or they'd have to change. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It's strange. I thought confronting her would feel like victory. It just feels empty. That's because you were fighting for peace, not points, Daniel said. Peace doesn't cheer. He reached over, took my hand, thumb tracing the edge of my palm. You don't owe anyone another explanation. For the first time that day, I smiled. Small, real. Sunday morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. My phone buzzed with a new message. From Mom. Thank you for helping with the house. We didn't deserve your grace, but I'm grateful anyway. I read it twice. No guilt, no manipulation, just quiet acknowledgement. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The next few days were oddly peaceful. No knocks, no late-night calls, just the sound of my own routine. Work, meals, sleep, stillness. But by midweek, something unexpected shifted. I stopped feeling like the victim who escaped. I started feeling like a woman with choices. I began walking after work again, longer each evening. The autumn air in Springfield carried wood smoke and cold clarity. Each step loosened another invisible rope I'd been tied with for years. I realized I hadn't really protected the house, I'd protected myself. That Thursday, I met Daniel at a small cafe downtown. He was already there, laptop open, coffee half finished. He smiled when he saw me. You look lighter. I think I am, I said. He leaned back. You've been surviving on damage control your whole life. You're finally learning to live without it. Maybe, I said with a grin. I might even learn what to do with spare energy. He raised his cup. To peace that doesn't need anyone's permission. We clinked paper cups. It sounded small, but it felt enormous. That night, I dreamed I was back in my parents' living room, except this time, everything was still. No shouting, no laughter, no tension humming beneath the wallpaper. Just sunlight through the blinds and the echo of my own footsteps. When I woke, I realized that the silence I'd feared for so long was never emptiness. It was space. Space to rebuild, space to breathe, space to belong to myself. By the weekend, I felt steady enough to visit the old neighborhood. I didn't tell anyone. I just drove by the house that now legally belonged to me, but emotionally no longer did. The porch swing still creaked in the wind. Dad's old truck sat in the driveway, curtains drawn. It didn't feel like revenge. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a chapter finally ready to close. I parked for a minute, just watching. Somewhere inside, maybe they were talking about me. Maybe they still believed I was cruel. I realized it didn't matter. I didn't need to rewrite their story anymore. I was busy writing mine. I started the engine, turned the car around, and didn't look back. The road ahead was quiet, and for the first time, that quiet didn't scare me. It sounded like possibility. A few weeks passed. The chaos slowed, the messages dwindled, and the noise that once filled my life, the constant, exhausting hum of other people's emergencies, finally went silent. At first, the quiet felt foreign, like waking up in a house after the guests have gone and realizing you can actually hear your own heartbeat. But day by day, I started to recognize it for what it was. Peace. December rolled in, the kind of cold that burns your cheeks and makes coffee taste better. I spent my mornings at the window, watching the neighborhood kids drag sleds across frozen sidewalks. I worked, I read, I cooked actual meals, instead of eating whatever was closest to the laptop. Every now and then, I'd see a new message pop up from my mom. Always polite, always brief. Hope you're warm. Your dad's back is acting up again, but we're fine. Merry early Christmas, sweetheart. Each time, I smiled faintly and set my phone down. I didn't need to respond to everything anymore. Silence had become a language of its own, one they were finally starting to understand. One afternoon, I received a letter from Miriam. Real paper, real ink. Inside was a short note written in her small, neat handwriting. It's done. The Johansson House title has been fully transferred into the trust. You've protected them from themselves, and you've protected yourself too. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in my drawer next to the old copy of the ledger I'd sent months ago. Not as trophies, just quiet evidence that I hadn't imagined any of it. For years, I thought closure would come with confrontation, with one big apology or cinematic forgiveness. But it didn't. It came from paperwork, signatures, and silence. It came from knowing I didn't have to explain anymore. A week before Christmas, Daniel came over holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. Don't worry, he said. It's not jewelry. You'd hate that. I laughed. You're right. I tore the paper carefully, revealing a simple wooden plaque. Burned into the surface were the words, "Your worth isn't measured by what you give away." I felt my throat tighten. "You remembered." "Of course I did," he said softly. "That was the first thing you told me when you started pulling away from them, that you didn't know what your worth was without giving something up." I traced the letters with my fingertip. It's strange. I used to think boundaries would make me hard, but they just made me honest. He smiled. "Honest looks good on you." Christmas morning arrived with no phone calls, no family group texts, no last-minute guilt invitations. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel left out. I felt free. Daniel and I spent the day with a small group of friends who had quietly become the family I chose. People who never kept score, never used "you're strong" as an excuse to take more. We cooked too much food, opened gifts that didn't come with strings, and watched old holiday movies until the couch felt like a cloud. At one point, my friend Mia raised her glass and said, "To peaceful holidays, and to cutting out the chaos." We all laughed, but I felt that line settle deep in my chest like truth. Later that evening, after everyone left, I hung Daniel's wooden sign by my front door. When I stepped back to look at it, the reflection in the glass made it seem to glow in the lamplight. I whispered the words aloud, slowly. "Your worth isn't measured by what you give away." And I realized they weren't just words anymore. They were instructions. A few days after New Year's, an email arrived from Brianna. It was short. No insults, no sarcasm this time. "I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted." I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled, because she was right, even if she didn't understand how. What I wanted wasn't revenge. It wasn't to win. It was to stop losing myself. I closed the laptop, poured myself tea, and sat by the window as snow fell in slow, silent flakes. For years, I had lived in a house built on obligation and applause that never came. Now I lived in one built on peace, and no one could take that from me again without my permission. Sometimes I still think about my family, about whether they tell people I abandoned them, or if they've rewritten the story to make sense of the distance I needed. But it doesn't bother me anymore. Let them have their version, because I know mine. Mine is about a woman who stopped mistaking sacrifice for love, who learned that being the strong one doesn't mean carrying everyone else's weight. It means knowing when to finally set it down. When I lock the door at night, the wooden plaque greets me in its quiet way. It doesn't feel like a fence keeping people out anymore. It feels like a light guiding me home. And if someday they find the courage to knock again, not for help, but for understanding, I'll decide then whether to open the door. For now, it stays closed, not out of anger, out of peace. Because the truth is simple. I'm Emma Johansson, and I'm finally free.